Concord Players are putting on a production of She Kills Monsters in Concord, Massachusetts, running from November 7th through the 22nd. She Kills Monsters is a play about a woman coming to terms with tragedy through 2nd edition D&D. It'll tug at your heartstrings and be rad as the nine hells. For more information and to purchase tickets, check out their website at concordplayers.org. Welcome to the Game Masters Book Club, where great fiction becomes your next great tabletop role-playing experience. This is Astro City, Life in the Big City, the first graphic novel set in the eponymous Silver Age superhero setting of writer Kurt Busiek and artists Brett Anderson and Alex Ross. Game Masters and comic aficionados Jonathan Mazur, Shaun Murphy, and John Corbett take us on a tour of this city of heroes, meeting both the iconic superpowered citizens and some everyday ones as well. Let's get into the conversation.
Okay, welcome everybody to the Game Masters Book Club. I'm Eric Jackson, and I'm here with some fabulous Game Masters who are here to talk about a fabulous series of comics, starting with the first 6 issues, Astro City, bound together in the Life in the Big City graphic novel. Written by Kurt Busiek and drawn by Brett Anderson, just one of the classics of superhero comics. And fits within our rules here at Game Masters Book Club in that we don't cover games that already have their own game systems, so Marvel and DC are out, but Astro City is in. And today I'm going to have our Game Masters introduce themselves and tell us a little bit about their style of running games, and also tell us about when they run a superhero game, what's their favorite or least favorite superpower to have to deal with. I'm going to start initially out with veteran member Shaun Murphy, who's done a couple of other shows before. Shaun, tell the folks about yourself and tell them about your favorite or least favorite superpower.
Yeah, so Shaun here. I've run a bunch of one-shot superhero games. I think that some of the old DC system, upgrading those and bringing them in, people get sort of excited about those. I've run some multi-table games with superheroes. I just think the genre works really well for people that like role-playing games and that it's action-oriented, you have powers, and it's not that far a step aside from the normal role-playing people like to do. In terms of superpower, love, hate, I have to say telepathy. I can deal with Green Lantern rings and super speed and super strength, but telepathy just seems to be... We don't have as easy an internal marker of how that works in terms of what it allows you to do or not do. And it doesn't help that the source material, the comic books, if you look at sort of Saturn Girl's powers, for example, in the Legion, they just go up and down at various times as to what is a powerful telepath and what isn't. Jean Grey in the same category. So from Marvel Gold to moving on through time, the various other incarnations she's had.
Agreed. Telepathy can be a stumper and hard to do in a live setting.
Although it might work better on a VTT platform rather than live.
I want to say I dealt with it with a moral code, because we had a Jean Grey-like character in a game I'll reference in a second.
Jonathan, why don't you pick it up and talk to the folks about the kind of superhero games you've run and your favorite or least favorite superpower.
I'm Jonathan Mazur, bona fides as a GM. Is that how I'm introducing myself?
However you want to talk about it.
I ran a pulp game in college. I've run espionage, but probably the thing I spent the most of my energy and put love into, I guess, was a 6-part superhero game that I think I ran over 8 years. They were broken into chapters, but inspired in part by today's book and also Kingdom Come and some other things. I've always considered myself more of a player, but if Eric asked me to do this, I couldn't say no.
Jonathan is overly modest. He is one of the better GMs that I know.
And I would say, referring back to that long-running game, which was called A World Needs Heroes, in case I lapse and just refer to it that way, it was super speed or hyper speed or super reaction. Not that I have anything against speedsters, other than apparently the ability to say it. It sort of becomes everybody wanted to react faster, and it wound up becoming sort of an arms race, as it were, because of the number of actions that would occur in a particular round. It got a little hairy, let's just say. But I wouldn't say no to it. Although, in my experience, every speedster I've ever had as a player, it's like, okay, you have 3 actions before anybody else moves. Yeah, I'm going to delay. I'm going to hold back. I'm like, all right, I don't really know why you're playing a speedster then, but okay.
John Corbett, why don't you talk to us about your superhero gaming and your least or favorite superpower?
My name is John Corbett. I've been mostly GMing for about 45 years, I guess. The majority of that time, I have been doing fantasy roleplay like Dungeons and Dragons with occasional forays into other genres. My first superhero game was the I want to say 70s or 80s Marvel Superheroes RPG that TSR put out. And that was not a great system, but picked up superhero games as a player off and on many years later. A mutual friend of ours, Dave Clarkson, introduced me to Mutants and Masterminds. And then, of course, I got the Marvel Superheroes game that uses the Cortex role-playing system some 15, 20 years ago. I really liked that one quite a great deal. So I'm not super, pardon the pun, super experienced as a superhero player GM or superhero GM, but I still enjoy it as an occasional foray. The only power that I think I found annoying or problematic is teleportation, because it's a little bit like the super speedster problem. I had written down telepathy, by the way, but I had to scratch it. The teleporter has a similar problem to the speedster. They can go anywhere, be anywhere. It's very hard unless you have a very mature and cooperative player. Very hard to pin them down.
Absolutely true. And I'm Eric Jackson, and I've been playing since the Pleistocene, and I've played a lot of superhero games. I've run 1 or 2 in the past, but it hasn't been my main strength, but I do really like to read a lot about superheroes, so I'm hoping that will make up for my lack of tabletop experience. But the superpower that I encounter both in superhero games and also fantasy role-playing games a lot of the time, I'm not really a big fan of mind control, which is very interesting from a plot sort of idea or rather within a novel or a comic line. But player agency always becomes the issue at that point. And I'm like, even the subtle Jedi, these aren't the droids you're for, can feel really unfair after a while when that happens. Not to all the way up to John Corbett and I are currently playing in a game where we have a bard who could just tell everybody, you do this, and they do. That level of superpower, the idea that you can just control minds, always makes me a little hesitant to put an Xavier kind of character into any sort of game. They make me nervous.
You mean from a player versus player point of view, or?
That's definitely where the biggest problem is. But my other issue is with just the morality of here, because I'm generally having people play heroes, because that's the kind of GM that I am. It's very difficult for me to rationalize you're a good guy and you're controlling people's minds. It sort of violates the moral code of what I think heroes should do. So I'm kind of less excited about mind control characters.
Okay, I get it. That makes sense.
Okay, now is the time where I get to give a summary of our current book so that folks know what we're talking about. This is incredibly spoiler, and that makes sense because we're going to be breaking down this book into little tiny pieces and doling it out to you so you can use every part of it. So if you haven't read the book, now's a great time to log off, go read the book, and come back and keep
listening to us.
Let's get started on Astro City, Life in the Big City. It's a collection of the first 6 issues of this 1990s revival, Wonder of Superheroes. There's 6 short stories that don't require a lot of lore for you to enjoy, and yet with the obvious 1950s nostalgia of the world that never was, but gosh golly, wouldn't just swell if it had. We could look down on Astro City from on high from Mount Kirby and feel like we recognize them. Busiek showcases the wonder of superheroes in quiet and crafted stories rather than the
blood-soaked, hyper-realistic
types of stories that were common in the 1990s. We have a powerful hero who berates himself for every second wasted as he longs to fly more for himself. A small-time hood who learns a
secret identity
and can't figure out how to profit from it. A beat reporter who sees the story of the century but doesn't Corbett, a young woman who balances her love of her family and the darkly magical part of the city she's from with the bright three-color world of downtown
Astro City.
An alien is tracking the heroes of Astro City and sends a message out into outer space about what he's learned. And two superheroes debate superheroing while on a date. Definitely not your typical stories that you were seeing in the 1990s comics. All of these stories serve to introduce us to a brand new superhero world full of rich history and archetypes that any lover of superhero comics will enjoy. Even the artwork from Anderson evokes tradition with Samaritan's toga, like a cape, to innovations on themes, like adding a super cigar-chomping grandpa and son to the first family. This is only the first of 100 issues of Astro City, but the world feels full and extraordinary. Gentlemen, what did I miss?
I think Busiek says in the introduction that it's purposefully a response to what was, when he wrote it a few years earlier, the deconstructionist trend in comics at the time, most notably Watchmen, The Dark Knight Returns. Basically, I think he says something to the effect of the point of deconstructing something is to learn from it and then possibly put it back together so that it works better than it did before or goes elsewhere. You can do other things with it. The only other thing I would add is while it's about superheroes, it's also not about superheroes. It's about a world that has superheroes in it and perhaps what living in that world might be like. And if I may, I read comically slowly. So for me to have read a book more than once is the highest honor I can give to it. And I have read this particular collection probably a half dozen times. And the first story in particular, I absolutely love.
Fantastic. Shaun, any other themes or anything I've missed out on?
So it's interesting. I mean, I also enjoy it. They just finished the Metro book collection of the whole series that I've been reading through. The first story strikes me as Busiek wrote a Superman story and realized he couldn't sell it as a Superman story.
Oh, very much so, yeah.
And it's just been sitting in his drawer trying to figure out where he could use it. Because it's really the only one where you get the inner monologues. Well, it's not the only one, because Jack in the Box later on, spoilers, and some others. But it's the only one where you spend a sizable amount of time hearing the inner thoughts of the hero, and he's actually moving from fight to fight and crisis to crisis. Crises are sort of background noise somehow to most of the stories that are going on. And I recognize that, Steeljack later on, it features his internal monologues, but he's not a hero. He's a reformed or trying to reform villain.
But that's another story arc that is marvelous. I love it.
Oh, they're not all great. All of them are very good. Not all of them are great, is the way I would put it.
And you use the magic word, John, marvelous, because it does invoke the Marvels, that graphic novel.
Well, that wasn't intentional, but sure.
John Corbett, anything you want to add to the themes conversation here?
You guys encapsulated it pretty well. I guess the only other thing I might add is that it tries to move in directions that haven't been gone in with your traditional comics. Like, yes, it is a deconstruction and kind of a reaction to the blood-soaked 90s, if you will. But it's also tried to see, it's aspirational as far as the storytelling. It's like, what can we do here? What are some of the possibilities that we haven't tried with these superhero stories?
For those of you who don't know, John Corbett is the guy I mentioned at the end of every episode who does the artwork for the show. So I'm also interested, how do you feel the artwork played into this particular series?
Oh, it's gorgeous. Anderson is a fantastic choice for this. That's the great command of the line art. Between that and the layouts, the colors, I think it's a great, great piece. It's not like my favorite. It's not what I reach for usually when I'm looking at a new book, but I'm also pretty heavily ensconced in the Marvel and DC atmosphere environments. So, but yeah, I still think this is perfectly great for what they're trying to do.
Oh yeah, Eric. One minor thing you left out was that the covers were all done by Alex Ross. So someone you guys may have heard of. I don't know. He's fairly popular amongst the series.
So you can't much love comic and not love Ross.
So the other thing we're here to do is
Besides,
tell people how much we like the comic. How, if we wanted to run a game that felt like Astro City, what would be the best system in which we could conceivably run this? And I'm going to start with you, John Corbett. Can you talk to us about what system you think would evoke the feeling of Astro City?
All right, I think my choice is a little potentially controversial. I read this book and I see, much like we touched on earlier, I see that it's not really entirely about the heroes. The heroes and the city and the conflicts going on there are kind of background to, or rather, they are sort of the thing that happens to the characters. So, like in the one chapter, it's the criminal who's got an idea. He's a small time crook, an idea, but then he wants to get out of town. The other one is about the lady who she's kind of from the darker part of town, and then she comes into the bright part of town, and all kinds of wild stuff happens around her and to her. I think a system that supports more human characters, the sort of backup characters, would be one that would best evoke this Life in the Big City book. How exactly would you do that? I would suggest something like, again, maybe controversial, Fiasco, where you can take a bunch of cards and put people in situations, and you have to get buy-in from your players. If you tell them, hey, we're going to go do a superhero game, and then you say, you're a bus driver, or you're this lady.
Yeah, you're not the heroes, but yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, you're this lady who goes to work at the bank. So you have to prep your players for that. But I think it could work as a series of vignettes with Astro City as the background. Similarly, I think something like Dread would work with the Jenga tower. You would progress towards an endpoint that logically would happen within every game session. These wouldn't be campaigns, in my opinion. And if you wanted a heroic spin, maybe the players are part of an organization that's heroic or law-abiding. The first idea I thought of was maybe you're part of some government organization that catalogs what Astro City's super heroic phenomenon are, and that way you're purposely going out and running into these people, these heroes and whatnot.
Like the alien guy in, I think it's issue 5.
Yeah, no, reconnaissance, chapter 5. You're right.
Jonathan, would you like to follow up Fiasco with your choice of mechanics?
Well, if I can speak to John's point for a second.
Sure.
Because I have often considered doing something in a superhero world, but where the players aren't the superheroes. And as you say, you'd need complete buy-in, or at least you'd have to be careful about how you sold it. But I was actually thinking something more akin to a completely different series, which is Brian Michael Bendis's Powers, where again, superheroes exist in the world and it's about interacting with that world, but the main characters, at least back when I was reading it, are police officers. And I actually think somebody did do a similar sort of game. I want to say the Gumshoe Rules have a universe called Mutant City Blues or something like that, or Mutant City Blue, like police blue, though I haven't personally investigated that. If I were going to do it and somehow do it from a superhero perspective, I would probably, just because of the range of powers presented in the 6 issues that we're looking at, I would probably pick a system that was a little crunchy. So probably something like Mutants and Masterminds, which I believe is currently in its 3rd edition, but I believe I mostly played the 2nd edition myself. And I believe Steve Kenson just confirmed that they're doing a 4th edition the other day. The superhero game I ran that I referred to a couple times, we actually did, and this is, what'd you say, Eric? The Pleistocene? This is really old, but we used a heavily modified version of the villains and vigilante rule, and there was a lot of math involved. But that was mostly in the creation part of the characters. In the way that it inspired my game, it was, what are the superheroes doing when they're not involved in a big fight? Whether you want to call that downtime or real life, or they have jobs, they have relationships, they have friendships, the eating, sleeping, making a living, that dating, romance, whatever. All of those things to me, within the comic book world, within the world of the superhero, I would just say I was able to mine that for a lot of very interesting story possibilities.
Shaun, you want to follow that up?
Somewhat depends on what game you want to be playing here. I mean, if they're playing ordinary people and they're finding out about the supers, maybe that's a kids on bike variation. If it's sometimes they're ordinary people, sometimes they're not. Maybe you're looking at a system like GURPS or Savage World that lets you do a little bit of each. I probably would pick Prowlers and Paragons because it has pretty good tier system. And so it would be the same system no matter what you're playing. You just tier down the ordinary people, make them pretty good at something, like the woman in the story who's knows about magical this sort of thing, or the burglar who finds something out. Maybe he's got some burglary skills to sort of bring it together. But I think and this sort of goes to John's comment about fiasco, you kind of need to have a really good session 0 where everybody nods their heads and agrees on the types of stories you want to be telling together.
Deeply important to make sure everybody agrees what kind of game you're going to be playing. Along the same lines of what we've been talking about here, I was looking at Worlds in Peril. It has a Powered by the Apocalypse
game engine.
So I think it's a good match for Astro City. You get both an origin playbook and a drive playbook, which is actually more of like an archetype playbook. So you can get both of those really classic feels of the characters that you're going to be dealing with. And in addition, the game really does focus on those relationships with players and NPCs with a system of bonds that help shape the game in a mechanical way. If you fail a roll, you can burn one of your bonds, and as a hero for the city, you have a bond with the city, and maybe if you burn the bond, there can be a lot of property damage. It might only be one type of fallout. You could also have bonds with other heroes, and that could lead to the superhero group having tension, or you could have a bond that results in creating your future nemesis. The bonds become this personal focus of what can force a superhero game, which very often can become a smash and blast game, into something more appropriate to Astro City style kind of game, which was why I picked it. I'm dying to try it now. I'm like, this sounds great. I've watched a couple plays of it and I'm excited by it. So I think it really would be cool. But along the lines of finding cool stuff, we're going to move on to our portable section, which is where you guys can tell me all the cool things that you might steal for your own games, whether it be super or not. We'll reverse order and we'll start with Shaun.
I mean, I really liked Shadow Hill, which is the haunted part of the city. I liked that there were rules that you understood in how to operate there. I liked the fact that the heroes there were a certain type of hero, like the Hanged Man, the Confessor. When we get there, he'll also be somebody who might hang out in that part of the city. And I liked that notion of this part of the city is different than the rest of the city. And I've actually started a City of Mist game, and it's got me thinking about how having sort of unique areas causes players who have picked powers or attributes that sort of fit in that area to get a moment to shine in a way they might not in the bright and sunny rest of Astro City or a similar type environment.
Absolutely looking forward to seeing how you handle that since I'm in that game. Continuing to reverse, Jonathan, what items do you think you'd like to swipe out of Astro City and
up into one of your campaigns? Although you said you had already done something like that?
We talked about how Samaritan is possibly the most obvious archetype or replacement for Superman, and no disagreement here. But in discussing Superman before or reading about him, I've seen it a lot of different creators say, well, it's really Superman that's the important part, to emphasize the Clark Kentness of it, if you will. And yeah, that brings me back to what I was saying. I found that sometimes a superhero one of the players had to do in their secret identity, the romance with the guy across the hall or something like that provided just as much drama and or entertainment and or comedy at times as a supervillain robbing the museum again. So that sort of, I don't know what you'd call it, everydayness, down to earth, the ordinary little slices of life. How about that? I think that, again, can be mined for all sorts of entertaining little vignettes. Other than that, I would just say the comprehensive, I think Shaun made reference to the well thought out city itself, but just the comprehensive history of the world that we don't get a ton of it in these first 6 issues, but I think the reader is left with the notion that it's there, that, they reference things in a way that it's like, I don't know what they're talking about, but I kind of want to. Just some of the allusions that are made to the Silver Age and some other things. It's like, oh, there's obviously more stories here. And I, for one, am curious as to what they are.
And that's the real goal of every game master, right? To give out information about your world and have the players feel like, ooh, I'd like to know more about that. John, do you want to tell us about the stuff that you would find portable from Astro City?
If I were going to utilize something, I would probably mine I think this is the second and third chapter, the scoop, the sort of generational nature of the heroes running around Astro City. When he goes down into that subway and he ends up encountering from the past, I mean, the story itself is somewhat in the past, but then when you sort of flash forward to the future part of the story, some of the same heroes are still running around. And it got me thinking about, well, I wonder, how would I would like to run a story about how the world or the players handle an aging superhero, somebody who's coming to the end of their life. Are they going to get a nice, happy retirement? Do they go do something outlandish, like retire to Mars? You have a celebration on the moon? Or is it horrific? Like maybe they all experience some sort of apocalyptic or nuclear ending, or they all go crazy or something, and it's something you dread. It just seems like it would be a really interesting thing. Like what happens as the superheroes age? I think that would be an interesting thing to explore.
John, when we get to the media, I have a great suggestion for you.
All right.
All right. For me, the takeaway was the 1950s that never was, that I'm currently longing for a utopic world where journalists tell the truth, superheroes debate morality.
Supreme, the most powerful superhero, spends all of his time trying to figure out how he can help people.
That seems like the best of all possible worlds. I would love to engender that kind of feeling in a superhero game that I would run. I think that maybe not necessarily the nostalgia of the 1950s, that utopic kind of feeling that I think all of Astro City radiates as it tells its stories, even in the little tiny slices of life, because it seems like everyone has hope. And gosh golly gee, I do like me some hope.
Okay. Sort of a Silver Age feel?
I will take your word for it as a non-scholar of comics.
Yeah, so Silver Age is generally the 60s or so. Before Conan in the 1972, 73s, things started getting a little bit more gritty. You see Neil Adams and Denny O'Neil taking over Batman and moving it away from the campiness into more of the Dark Knight detective sort. So the Silver Age, when you have happy Flash and happy Green Lanterns running around and they're all in the big clubhouse together. And
yeah, what can I say? That I'm a sucker for that kind of superhero.
Yeah, I know one of the game systems, I want to say it was Silver Age Sentinels?
Yep, that's right.
Basically, their marketing thing was sort of a Silver Age sensibility with a modern overlay. So in other words, it's supposed to be bright and optimistic and, well, I guess hopeful, but I think it's hard for people to go back. Those of us that know what happened, it's hard to go back to pre-Watergate or even recapture that JFK Camelot.
Yeah.
I know you've said 50s several times, but technically it's 1959, and I think what they're trying to evoke is the hope of the turn of the decade into the 60s.
Anyone have more portables or comments?
I do want to follow up on what John said about the history. He does throw out things that don't happen until later. You're one of the stories, and ironically enough, an arc called the Silver Age. But he's also not afraid to have things happen now. Like, I can't recall, and maybe, Jonathan, you remember, I don't think they ever resolve the alien hitting that alarm and telling his fellows to come and invade Earth. Like, I don't think we ever see that happen.
Wondering about that.
I will admit, when I was doing a little research today, number one, the first thing that struck me, I'm like, wow, this thing's been running for 27 years? Huh. How is that? Oh, yeah, I guess it is. And the second thing was they sort of touched on different things. And I must admit, I don't remember the name of the alien race that the protagonist of the Chapter 5 story is. But it did make a reference to the fact that those aliens did eventually invade Astro City. Now, if they did, I don't remember reading that story, but I will also say I have a bunch of comics upstairs that I have not read yet. Because again, I read very slowly.
Again, I don't know if he did or didn't do it, but he certainly didn't do it immediately. And I think that's one of the interesting things when you have a creator-owned comic doing superheroes, because in a DC or Marvel universe, there would be an editor going, hey, when are you going to resolve this storyline? And there'd be letters saying, hey, when are you going to solve this? Well, partially because this run it was only 6 issues and then they restarted it again.
I was going to say, if one of the things apparently in the 27 years that Astro City has been published, one of the recurring themes, and I don't know if we ever said that Kurt Busiek's day job is writing for Marvel and DC. This was a passion project for him. The publication schedule, there have been all sorts of hiccups and hangups over those 27 years in terms of, I think it was briefly monthly or bi-monthly, but yeah, then it's usually like, oh, is he doing it again? You know, and in fairness, the man has had, frankly, some weird health issues, mercury poisoning. Who gets that anymore? But you're right. That's another fun thing to maybe be able to do or steal. I know that in the game that I ran, I planted seeds for things that took 4 or 5 years to bear fruit. But when it did, and everyone realized that, oh, wait, you mean that guy, that time with the thing? It's worth it sometimes.
Let's take this out of roleplay and into inspiration. Let's talk about media that folks could get similar inspiration from. Since I already told John Corbett
I was going to give him a recommendation. I'll start this off not with a graphic novel, but a regular novel.
In fact, everything I'm going to talk about are novels, which makes me the odd man out, I bet. And if not, I do like reading about superheroes. The first one is called Heroin Addiction by Genre Redefined. There is a character named Vera Noble, and she's living away from the big city, serving coffee in a diner, trying to live the normal life, and she gets pulled back into the superhero world through some family drama, but it spends a lot of time on personal, and I think it relates very well to what happens in Astro City. Similarly, from a YA perspective, Not Your Sidekick by C.B. Lee is a superheroes are very common. Jessica Tran is from a long line of supers, but she doesn't have her powers, so she gets a internship to beef up her college application, but wouldn't you know it, it turns out that one of the supervillains is in charge of the corporation, and from there, things happen. So that one is this is what it's like to live in a superhero world. And finally, the one
I wanted to recommend to you, John, is the Velveteen Versus series by Shaun Murphy. The first book is Velveteen versus the Junior Super Patriots.
Shaun Murphy has a character named Velveteen who can animate stuffed animals, and she is teamed up with other teen heroes like Action Dude and Sparkle Bright, who are really fantastic archetypes. The whole story is a bit more cynical and snarky than Astro City, but it does have the truth and justice of what it means to be a superhero in it. And it does actually deal with the original 3 superheroes who start the whole superhero sort of generation. And they all are in the background for the first 2 books. And in the 3rd book, which is Velveteen versus the Multiverse, they eventually resolve what happened to those main superheroes. They are there, and what happens to them after they sort of peak and leave becomes very interesting. Why don't you pick it up from there, John, and tell us sort of media you think would be similar to Astro City?
In line with the systems that I'd recommended, I was thinking that there's a Hawkeye series by Matt Fraction and David Aja that encompasses some of the everyday problems that you could end up dealing with if you were living in a city full of superheroes. I guess not that much dealing on the superheroes, but it's just kind of hilarious. And it's a character who doesn't have any powers running around, and he's trying to take care of his business, and he's just super bad at it. And I found that incredibly entertaining. So that's one thing I might recommend. And then if you wanted to take it up a notch, love The Expanse. I haven't read the books, but I know the TV series. I love how the characters on that show are thrust into very difficult situations, and they have to make extremely hard decisions in deep space where a small mistake can be fatal. So that's another one I like to recommend when people are thinking about making a game a bit of what kind of challenges to put together for players. And lastly, if you're doing vignettes like I suggested, Love, Death, and Robots, that animated series on Netflix, is pretty great for setting. Like it sets up the world, it gives you the main characters and tells you the conflict, all in the span of just a few minutes, and then you're off with the entertainment. So I think that could also be really inspirational for a Astro City game.
Shaun, do you want to pick it up from there? What sort of media would you recommend?
I think Kurt Busiek is a good comic book writer. He's right there with Mark Waid in terms of people that can tell a good story. You won't go wrong with Marvels. Certainly, we already referenced that as part of this. Secret Identity, which is Superman, but he's not flashy like Superman. He's sort of hiding. If you really like the Silver Age, Untold Tales of Spider-Man is definitely in that sort of genre of sort of has that happy feel to things. In terms of other media, this reminds me a lot of Wild Cards. The book series, first of all, it's also in a series of stories. Wild Cards deals with both superheroes and non-superheroes, and there is, particularly in the earlier versions, many things. Towards the end, it gets a little bit, it seems like they're sort of looking to try to find something to talk about. But certainly in the beginning part, I thought Wild Cards had an excellent way of sort of bringing together new concepts for superheroes and how they interact with each other and with their environments.
And who wrote Wild Cards?
You mean who edited it?
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah, the big George R.R. himself.
Yeah, Martin there.
Oh, I've heard of him. I think he did something else.
Well, sort of. He's most of the way there, but yeah, sure.
Okay. Jonathan, would you bring us home on the inspiration train here?
I will try. Basically, I was going to say Kingdom Come, because it is in one sense very different from Astro City. In another sense, it's very archetypical and was also one of the things that inspired my game that time. But if I can sort of squeeze around the limitation, anything really by Mark Waid is probably good. Irredeemable, Incorruptible. He had an excellent run on the Fantastic Four back in the 2000s. I know the first trade is called Imaginaut, switching gears, a fresh take on what I suppose some people would argue is infinitely retread material. I very much enjoyed the animated series, My Adventures with Superman. I believe it's available on HBO Max. I think that's what they're calling their service again this week. Anything by Gail Simone is also generally pretty good. Any of her superhero stuff, is really quite good. And if I can squeeze in one more honorable mention, there's a Canadian writer that is taking the position, what if the Bronze Age of comicdom had 4 regular publishers, DC, Marvel, and this company, Standard Comics. It's a Kickstarter thing that I supported, but if you go to the website, I think it's standard-comics.com. He uses a combination of original characters and ones that have fallen into the public domain to tell some entertaining stories. Oh, and I'm sorry, one more thing on systems, even though we covered it earlier. Honorable mention for icons, if nobody has said it.
That's our inspiration. Thank you, gentlemen. We're going to close out our episode tonight, and I'm going to ask you guys to talk about if any promotions, anybody or anything that our audience should know about. Why don't we start with you, Shaun?
No, I don't have anything particular other than based on the publishing schedule for this. I think in October, I certainly will be at Carnage and a gaming convention in Vermont. And yeah, hopefully others may as well.
Jonathan, anything to promote?
At the risk of sounding totally self-centered, I'm trying to do more voiceover work. I don't have a website right now, but if you want to hear my demos, you can send an email to thevoiceofjonathan@gmail.com. And otherwise, just support your local animal shelter. They do good work, people.
Excellent. John?
I would not mind giving a shout out to the Tradecraft podcast. It's not a competitor, don't worry. This is a podcast that
We have no competitors here. There's only all podcasts are amazing. It's fine.
Okay, so yeah, this is the only one. Okay, good. Tradecraft is run by a good friend of mine, J. Alex Morrissey. He's a writer, illustrator, designer, working since the 90s. Really talented guy. And on his podcast, he talks to creators, particularly in the comic book field, because that's where he got his start. They do interviews and they talk about all kinds of creative subjects. You know, he's got everybody from Kelly Sue DeConnick, he's got Billy Hines, Kevin Cuff, Russ Braun, all these great folks. And there's just, hours of stuff you can listen to. Recommend checking them out at jalexmorrissey.com.
All right, fantastic. Continuing in the local theme, I will say hi to my friends down at Command D. They're a great local comic book shop here in Massachusetts. And on a slightly wider note, I will tell folks, if you want to help out your comic book artist people, there's a great website called theheroinitiative.org, which is a great place. Basically, its mission for aging comic artists who maybe not been the most successful and are now trying to survive the medical situations or the retirement. And this is a great way if you have artists who you like in their hour of need and be a hero yourself. Look at the Hero Initiative.
I would say creators as opposed to artists, because they do
point taken.
Yeah, a lot of writers.
But yeah, they are great, actually. They always bring a bunch of guests to Baltimore Comic-Con every year, which is another thing that's coming up in the fall.
Yeah, which is when this episode will drop. So,
excellent.
All right, awesome. Anything else before we wrap up?
Yeah, one thing about Hope and Astro City. I think Astro City must be full of hope, because why would a bunch of criminals do any crimes in a city where somebody like Samaritan lived? It's a metropolis problem. That's my closing statement.
Fair point. Well, it's kind of like New York City in the Marvel universe. Like, there's how many heroes that call it home? Yeah, crazy.
Always trying to live that dream.
Excelsior! That's our discussion of Kurt Busiek's Astro City, Life in the Big City, the first of many amazing graphic novels in the Astro City lineup. Super thanks to John Corbett, Shaun Murphy, and Jonathan Mazur for their comic lore and unsurpassed game mastering knowledge. Thanks so much for coming on the show. Be sure to listen in when they return to discuss The Rocketeer, The Complete Adventures by Dave Stevenson. You've been listening to the Game Masters Book Club, brought to you by me, Eric Jackson, and K-Square Productions. You can find a complete transcript of today's discussion, as well as links to all of our podcasts at k-squareproductions.com/GMBC. You can learn about upcoming episodes on our social media on Blue Sky at gmbookclub.bluesky.social, on Facebook at Game Masters Book Club, on Mastodon at Game Masters Book Club, and on Instagram at Game Masters Book Club. If you've enjoyed the show, please like, subscribe, and comment on our episodes in your chosen podcasting space, and be sure to share those episodes with your gaming community. Thank you so much for listening. Continued praise and thanks to John Corbett for the podcast artwork and Otis Galloway for our music. Be sure to check out our next episode when Game Masters Karen Form, Jason Keeley, and Rob Tremarco return to discuss All Systems Red, the first novella in the Murderbot series by Martha Wells. Later, gamers, and to paraphrase the great Terry Pratchett, always try to be the place where the falling angel meets the rising ape.